Well, I know all of us have gotten very comfortable using this virtual and remote environment. And so I continually learn from teachers how to be effective through the medium. And actually, when it comes down to it, I find we can connect very, very well virtually as well as in person. We've gotten very comfortable with it. And one of the key things that I keep hearing is that we want to just keep reminding ourselves, what are our bottom line goals? What is our ultimate goal? And if I keep that always in front of myself as an educator, I can think of some workaround. I can figure out how to do that in a virtual environment. How might I do that when most of my contact with my learners might be asynchronous, or maybe just an occasional synchronous opportunity? We want to stay focused on our learners' goals. And to me, the blueprint for that is looking at those can-do statements that put proficiency right in front of me like a roadmap. So let's explore some of those ideas together as we start to think about what really are our learners' goals for learning another language. Well, I know, and thank you very much for the wonderful introduction, Luis, and such an honor to be here for this wonderful day of learning and sharing here at GWATFL. And every time I am working with educators, I'm back in my classroom, working with middle school or high school learners of Spanish. And every day when I walked in that classroom, I had to remind myself, why are they here? Why are they here? And it wasn't so much about just analyzing language. They had very practical goals in mind, which took me back to when I first started to understand the value of another language. At the age of 9, my family moved to San Francisco area, and suddenly I was immersed in another culture. And I realize now, the more I think about that, that my learners are always on one side of this divide. And they're saying, well, I'm here now, but I really want to be over here. I want to interact. I want to function with and within another culture. I need language. I need culture. I need understanding. I need skills. I need a global competence to be able to take in other perspectives and understand and communicate and collaborate. And so I look to my teacher always, and I keep thinking, well, would you just help me get there? Could you build the bridge that gets me from where I am now to where I want to be? And with that in mind, I keep thinking, well, then what is my role as an educator? How can I help my learners get there? Well, let's see. What happens in other skill areas, like learning to play the piano? The teacher is there, the coach is there, not making it easy, not just saying, oh, you're terrible, you're not yet a concert pianist, but guiding me carefully, planning the instructional route so that eventually Don Shirley becomes an amazing jazz pianist, like Tim Young we're going to hear later. Fantastic, exciting. If I am learning to swim, well, there are sort of those methods of throwing the baby in the water, but not without the coach there right with that baby, right? And as I start to learn other skills, sometimes I need a little support, like the waterboard here that I'm holding on to, just to learn one skill, how to paddle better. Eventually, though, what happens to that coach? They really fade further and further back because now they're giving very fine-tuned instruction so that eventually you're Michael Phelps. Or in the world of art, again, I may not try to be some famous artist like Frida Kahlo, but I can learn from her techniques, being coached very carefully, so that eventually I might have my own style of art and decide, do I want to be like Frida or something else? And I keep coming back to, again, the question that our learners ask us, can you help me get there? Not to your goals, teacher, but to my goals. And when I keep that in mind, I say, well, is that the atmosphere that is in my classroom? Are we really giving them the sense that they can do a lot with language, even at the most novice level? And do our classrooms, all of these on the left from classrooms, do they lead to and simulate how our learners are eventually going to use their language someday in a real situation. Maybe in an interaction, buying food on the street, maybe communicating with someone online, listening to some music from around the world, maybe in a collaborative job experience they may have or a project they're working on. If my classroom on the left, that world of language performance and development, doesn't lead to or look like the real world of proficiency, where there is no coach around anymore, where I have to be on my own independently using language, if those don't look like each other, my students are going to be very frustrated and just say, I took the language all these years, how come I can't do much with it? We want to make sure that they leave our class every day saying, look what I can do. And so I think about, well, how then do our instruction and our assessment strategies get our learners to these goals, that goal of a high level of proficiency? So I think about, well, what's authentic? What's real? And that is an excellent way to just quick check, is this going to work? Is this going to be effective? Is this going to really lead them to that goal of proficiency? So how do we use language in our daily life? Let's see, these are things that I see a lot in classrooms. But you know what? In my last month of using language, whether it was my first language, English, or my second language, Spanish, I have not taken one vocabulary test. I have not had to produce one translation. I have not presented a single memorized dialogue. I am not an actor on a stage. That is not authentic use of language, nor is it authentic evidence of that proficiency. What can I do independently without my coach? What I want to think about is, how can I help my learners and get evidence of them making plans, solving problems, so that they are ready someday when they are on the streets in Shanghai to solve some problems and get where they need to go, or completing some project. Is that what our classrooms look like? Is that the kind of evidence that we are putting forth so our students believe that they can do something with their language? So I think about, so what should my instruction look like? Let's see. I know that they have a lot of language about clothing, so I know I'll have them describe to your partner what you are wearing right now. So if you watching are my partner, I'm going to describe what I'm wearing. I'm wearing a blue shirt. I'm wearing glasses. My blue shirt has a little different pattern in here. You're saying, why are you saying this? It's obvious. I can see you. Fake. Not a real use of language. You know, I'm just trying to get you to use certain vocabulary. When might I actually have to describe? Maybe if I were at the Beijing Auto Show and my partner who I'm trying to meet says, I just got here, where are you? They're going to pull out their phone and say, describe what you're wearing so I can find you. Ah, there you are. There you are. Now I can come and find you, right? Or here is an authentic invitation. What if I had my learners do a task like this? You'll notice in all three of these, same vocabulary, same language being used, but a hugely different motivation, a huge difference in what is real evidence of what I can do in the language. Keeping that in mind, I want to make sure that I develop the right skills so my students grow from the beginning of my program to the end, as far as they can go, as close to their proficiency goal as they want to go. Maybe along the way they decide, I'm not going to become an Olympic swimmer. I'm not going to become a jazz pianist. I'm not going to become Frida Kahlo. But they have skills that they certainly didn't have when they started on this journey of building their proficiency. And they have confidence in those. I think about those can-do statements collaboratively developed and revised in 2017 with the state supervisors for languages, NACESFL and ACTFL. It really is a roadmap. It really is a roadmap to that goal that our learners have of proficiency. So I, again, look to the can-do statements for inspiration and guidance for me as the teacher to say, How can I help my students get there? How can I help them get to their destination of proficiency and develop it constantly so that they say, well, I have some degree of proficiency even after one day, even after 1 year, even after several years. It may not be the highest level I want yet, but I know that I'm on the right road. The can-do statements to me are an excellent way to define proficiency, to lay out that blueprint for me to develop proficiency, and also for me to make sure I get the right evidence of measuring proficiency. And this is where another foundational document in our profession comes into play, the World Readiness Standards, because it also says, well, what's the purpose behind that use of proficiency? I'm just not standing on a street corner and talking to myself. It's, well, is there an interpretive purpose? Am I trying to take in language, as you see in the icon here? Whether I am listening or reading or viewing, I'm taking in language. Can I understand it? Can I analyze it? Can I make a decision based on it? What about the interpersonal mode, where that communication is back and forth and exchanged and negotiated, as you see in the arrows here? How do I develop proficiency so my students are comfortable and confident and growing in proficiency in that mode? And how about in the presentational mode? You'll notice the arrows are going out. I am creating a message, not just for my teacher, but for a real audience. And I adapt to that audience. I adapt my medium. Maybe I'm writing, maybe I'm speaking, maybe I'm creating some media. How am I getting my message out? This is an amazing blueprint, so I can really look carefully at my program now and say, how do we define and develop and measure proficiency in the first stage of our program, in the middle stage, and near the end of our program, in all of these important communicative areas, matching what our learners want to do with language? Well, let's look at those can-do statements. How do they help me? It looks like an overwhelming chart. And it's just like, wow, there's a lot there to look at. So let's just break it down simply. Across the top, proficiency benchmarks. And you'll notice the proficiency benchmarks are not broken down into low, mid, high, because when I design a task that's at the novice level. Why would I design just this is a novice low task? You're already novice low because you walked in the door. After one day, you got at least 10 sentences and maybe one question, right? 10 words and a question, you're novice low. Great. I don't want to keep you at novice low. So I think about, well, what are some novice tasks? And now your performance might be at the low, the mid, or the high level. And my job is to guide you closer to that high level so that now you're ready for intermediate tasks. And once you're confidently over that barrier, again, low, mid, or high, and into the advanced. So think about the proficiency benchmarks as just really targeting the big range, and that's where I want my tasks to be, so that I allow for some variety within my learners in each mode. They might be stronger in interpersonal, stronger in interpretive, or stronger in presentational. And as I think about those performance indicators, they also break down this mode a little bit more for me, because not all interpersonal is exactly the same. Here's just the interpersonal chart, and I see, well, the big function of describing people, places, things, how and how well. Wow, that's this huge, long, horizontal continuum about exchanging information and ideas. Notice it starts at novice low, and I just keep getting better and better and better and better at it. Like in the swimming pool, getting better and better and better and refining my skills until you say, wow, you are highly proficient. You're not just minimally proficient, right? Asking and responding to questions is another huge function within the interpersonal mode. And here it is more highlighted. It, of course, is across all of these areas, but for me, it's kind of highlighted here about how can I meet my needs and address situations in conversations, where we really start to see that I am negotiating meaning with someone. And that third line is expressing feelings, emotions, advice, opinions, and preferences. So let's break down what is in each of these tiny little squares. I'm targeting my tasks. I'm thinking about different kinds of interpersonal. Let's look at the one about expressing, reacting to, and supporting preferences and opinions. Every single one of those squares breaks that down even further in my blueprint to say, well, what's the function? Express, ask about, and react with details. That's intermediate low. Novice can't quite do that, and advanced can do more. What's the context? It has to be a familiar topic, like this unit that we're thinking about, that we're focusing on for many, many, many weeks. And how well, what kind of language do you use? Oh, you create simple sentences and you ask follow-up questions. Oh, okay. I see my agenda. I can see where my students can demonstrate intermediate low in this kind of a conversation. So how do I develop that? Well, let's see what changes as we move from novice low all the way to the top. Let's look just at the functions. Here I see my agenda moving across the novice range. Not just I like, not just, oh, me too, but now, really, you do like that? Express, ask about, and react. There's my novice. In the intermediate realm, I'm adding more details, giving advice, providing and explaining. This is the big realm that I'm working on in the intermediate range. And when I look at the advanced range, maintaining the conversation, really taking ownership and providing explanations and comparisons. Wow, that started down at the novice level with I like. And you'll notice that it isn't focused on, well, teach this tense and then hope they can use it. At the beginning level, I am using I like with no concept of the grammatical structure behind it, but it's how I can express a basic preference. We're building up their functions in this piece of dissecting the can-do statements. Asking questions is another critical skill. There's novice low. Oh yeah, they just sort of sit there and wait for you to ask the right question. And of course, they've got the right answer, right? They know it automatically. So if I want to get you to the higher levels of novice, you have to start asking questions and even some original ones, starting to think about what you want to say. Because in the intermediate realm, it's all about the follow-up and the variety. Really continuing to push the conversation along, not in a predictable way, but now really listening and negotiating that meaning. And when we get to the advanced range, look at the change here now. Again, that word, maintaining the conversation, discussion, debate, probing, and precise questions. Wow. Again, we've come a long way. What I love about this is it also allows me to differentiate with my learners. I can say, well, you were able to ask some original questions, but they were still just so predictable. You really didn't follow up very well. Work on that for the next time. Okay, that's exactly what a coach would say. They wouldn't correct every error. They wouldn't, stop me when I mispronounce something. They would focus on what's really going to get me to a higher level of proficiency. And here again, I think about, well, what kind of language do I have at my disposal? Well, novices have pretty much very controlled language, right? It's practice, it's memorized, it's language that they've taken in. There may even be sentences, but it still is pretty much predictable. To cross over intermediate, it's that idea of creating. I'm thinking and it's coming out. Maybe not perfectly, but at least I'm trying, and I'm trying to connect my ideas. Notice that idea of connecting instead of just saying one sentence, one sentence, one sentence. Connecting is what gets me to a higher level, and that's what gets me way up into the advanced level, where I've thought about it, I've organized it in my head, and now I'm delivering that presentation, or I'm telling a story, or as you're asking me my opinion and we're negotiating it, I'm giving you an extended description. So this is my agenda. Well then, what do my tests look like? What's going to be the same? What's going to be different? Well, in a traditional test in the interpretive mode, I would ask you to translate something to show that you really understood it, or I would ask a bunch of questions, which usually get down to some really not so important details. In a proficiency assessment, I say, well, what's the intent of the document? Here is a jupu, and it is a genealogy book from a family, a Chinese family. I would not look at this to try to understand every single word, but to find out, is the story of this family similar to or different from my family story? When I then go to the can-do statements, I know how I can drill down and say, how do I develop this in my learners? I'm pulling out a can-do statement, the generic ones. I can identify the topic and related information in a resource about, okay, trying to get them into that intermediate low level. here is all my content. I'm going to be spending the rest of the time together today thinking about a school unit. And as I look at that content, how do these come together? Identify the topic and related information. This is what we're going to do in this unit. Here's going to be one of my overarching can-do statements customized for this unit, because that's what I need to think about as I develop your blueprint for higher levels of proficiency. So it could look like this. Here's an either-or chart. Instead of translating, instead of asking low-level detailed questions, find out what you can from this school website. Is it this or is it this? I'm giving you a little guidance because you need that. You need some coaching. It's not just here it is, read it, and you tell me what it says. See if you can find out these answers and then make a decision. Where would you rather go to school? Based on the information you found out, what's your conclusion? What are 3 reasons? Let's do that for interpersonal. A traditional test would be the teacher interviews each student. Well, then who's doing the negotiating of meaning? You are. The student doesn't have to. You'll manipulate the questions enough until finally they give you the right answer. When they are functioning and interacting with a real student, whether it's virtual or whether it's a person physically next to them, whether in their own school or around the world, they are negotiating meaning, and they're also much more engaged in the conversation. Often I've seen things like this where it's, okay, student A, you ask this, then student B, you say this. Student A, you respond like this, then student B, you ask this. It's like, okay, I can follow a script, but no one gives me a script when I'm on the streets in Shanghai. Instead, give me some topic that motivates me, that really gets me engaged, so I don't think so much about, did I ask 5 questions or did I ask 6? Let's see, 6 is going to get me an A and 5 is going to get me a B. I better ask one more question. I don't want that to be in my mind. I want it to be about what is bringing me into the conversation. Again, going back to the can-do statements, it really helps me to think about what do I need to make sure my task is going to pull out of my learners. Express, ask about, and react with some details. There again is that intermediate low description. Here's all my content. How do they come together? Oh, here's my can-do statement customized for this unit. I can exchange opinions about returning to school or continuing remote learning during the pandemic. Well, here's my assessment. Instead of saying, just make it up, why not give my students a bunch of authentic resources about going back to school in France and the great debate about it and the way that it's going to be set up in this school in France. And now, using this as the base, my partner and I are going to have a much richer and deeper conversation as we talk about these resources to now make our conversation happen about, returning to school. What did we learn here? How does that apply to us? Or should we just continue remote learning because that looks way too hard? What's in that chart down on the lower left? Again, presentational. Let's do one more mode. Then we're going to pause for some of your comments or questions you might have that maybe have been coming in. Often we say that you just fill in the blanks with the correct form of the word. But you know, when students are in real tasks, when they're doing something that they're actually interested in, they're not worried so much about all of that. Obviously, they want to express themselves as best they can. And sometimes just having a peer look at it and say, I don't know what it says here, that's enough of a filter for me to go in and change it. I want them motivated on, well, what is the message I'm trying to get across? And I can do it with the language that I have. If it's all about a specific cultural content, it may be that that wasn't motivating. It might not have been age appropriate for my middle school students. It might be that I'm assuming heritage or native speakers living in my community know the culture of their family's homeland, and that may be a false assumption. Instead, I want to give them an important topic that they can actually get passion around and really be able to express themselves in that presentational mode. Maybe it is thinking about school, a debate about a school rule or a school policy. That would engage my learners and give me a better sense of where is your level of proficiency in the presentational mode. And I go back again to those functions of the can-do statements to help me design better tasks and target the proficiency level. I can express my preferences and explain why, says the intermediate low. Given all my content in this unit, how about giving simple reasons why school is important in my life and for all children? And again, looking at authentic resources, I'm pulling from that to help me identify some reasons for myself or some reasons that make me think why other children around the world can or cannot go to school. Is it gender, as the bottom graph is showing us? So I will just take a moment here and pause and see if, Karen, you were going to be kind of monitoring a little bit. Thank you. If there are any questions that have come in about how we can help our learners get across this bridge and move towards their goals.
Hola, Paul. Yes, we
Hola.
have a question here for you. Somebody's asking if this question is related to the paragraph. If you're talking about novice level, is the paragraph, are you expecting that students will be writing the paragraph in the target language?
So I'm trying to think exactly where that might have been. So when I was showing the chart, control, when I was kind of breaking down the statements down into what is the novice, intermediate, the advanced level, true control of a paragraph is more advanced level. Putting sentences together that look like a paragraph is good intermediate, and sort of more random ideas would be a characteristic of novice. When I had the idea of the interpretive chart where it was either or, and then I had at the bottom, right, where it said, so where would you rather go to school, and list 3 reasons, there is a choice that I have to make. This is an interpretive task. Interpretive is, well, what is it that you understood? If I turn it into a presentational task by saying, you must write your answer for that, which is a paragraph probably, right? Here's why I want to go to this school with 3 reasons. Now it's more like a presentational task if I make you do it in Spanish, in Chinese, in Arabic, right? And so I have to be careful about making sure I'm being true to my mode. And all I'm trying to do there is capture your thinking. And notice when they were just checking off in that interpretive either or, they didn't have to express any language, but I knew they were finding the clues and showing me they could understand. By capturing at the bottom in English or in the best language they can in the target language, I don't evaluate it on how well they wrote. I evaluate it on, do I have evidence of your thinking, of the interpretive skill? Does that help, Karen?
Yes. Thank you so much. I'm checking here my chat and my questions. It doesn't seem we have more questions for now, but
Okay.
I am going to be watching here closely, and I will let you know if there are more comments.
We have one more.
Oh, we have more. Thank you.
In the Q&A. So it says, how do you adapt 90% immersion to virtual learning and Zoomflex classes?
If you wait just a minute, well, actually about 10 minutes, I actually want to walk you through an example that I did with the school, all right? And that idea of working in the virtual environment is always challenging. So let me keep that as a filter in mind as I continue on, all right?
I have one more question here.
Okay.
Do you think natives like language speakers are also acquire the language through this map?
As a native speaker, do you acquire language the same? That's very interesting. Proficiency is like totally does not have anything to do with your curriculum or how you learned. So if I'm a native speaker and if I took an English exam, an assessment of my evaluation of my proficiency, it would be evaluating what can I do? It looks at the characteristics of language. It is not tied to learning language as a second or third language. So it is used for jobs. Proficiency came out of the career world. I want to hire someone for this job. What's the minimum level of language skill that this person should have? So it is not tied to curriculum. It describes the development. We think about, I have now a young grandson who's 5, and watching his language develop, I can see him moving out of novice into intermediate. He's not at the advanced level, even though he's a native speaker, because he doesn't talk in paragraphs. He has ideas and he'll express them. And it started out more with words and phrases. So I could see the whole proficiency thing developing in first language.
Excellent. Thank you
Great.
so much.
Thank you. We'll have another pause point if I may, okay?
Thanks.
Great. So let's continue to think about that journey towards proficiency. And in my classroom, what I have to keep thinking about is well, how do I check for learning on today's can-do goal? Did they pick up the vocabulary they need, or a structure or a function? What about when they start to put those things together, more formative assessment? Can they actually use these pieces together in a meaningful communicative task? And finally, when I get to the summative level, at the end, near the end of my unit or at the end of the year, I really want to know, can they independently demonstrate that they've reached those unit goals, right? Can they actually do this without the coach doing so much of the work? And it's sort of that letting go that you see as part of this sending someone off on a journey. When they're right in front of me, you're coaching heavily and you're really kind of in control of the situation. The further they move down the road, you know you can't control what they're doing so much, right? Until finally you're happy to let go and say, show me what you can do. That's the summative level. So let's think about, again, this school unit. I've kind of been giving some pieces from it. What role does school play in our lives? We're trying to move from novice high into intermediate low. We're thinking about all those three modes of communication. And so, again, one of the key things I always like to look at is what's going to engage and motivate my learners. They don't want to just talk about, I have mathematics at 10, I have science at 2, what class do you like? It's like so predictable, keeping you down at that lowest novice level. Even with novice language, we can compare school systems, we can compare schedules and literacy rates and access. These are the issues. This is bringing in the social justice, the racial justice issues that we definitely want to bring into our classrooms. And I think about, okay, a daily learning target, an ongoing check for learning. I go back to my can-do statement formula and I say, okay, we're going to compare. What's the topic? School access. And I want them to be able to use simple sentences. So they're looking at access to school by gender in Peru compared to all of Latin America. All right. So here are some other ongoing checks for learning. And I want to emphasize how all three modes of communication work together to help support the learning. So here's a simple presentational task. Again, it's pretty novice-y. Just create a list of school supplies. Here's an interpersonal. Again, pretty novice. Ask and answer questions. What do you like and dislike about your school subjects? Here again, they're just looking at schedules to find out what is the same or different. Fairly lower level, but again, we're trying to start at that novice and just check, do you have this content? Can you ask these kinds of questions? Can you maybe use a particular structure, right? I just want to know that as today's quick learning check. Now I want to know, what can you do when you start to put those things together? Could you, from what we did before, brainstorm reasons why people can't go to school? Could you create a list of reasons why school is important? Can you look at these UNICEF statistics and create a chart to summarize your findings? So notice how we're pulling the vocabulary, we're pulling structures, we're pulling some of those functions like asking questions or describing in more detail. And now we're at a much richer demonstration of what you can do in the language with these formative assessments. Now you are ready for that summative assessment in the interpersonal. Look at what I'm asking you to do. If I had said, 9 weeks ago, oh, you're going to have this kind of a conversation and be like, coach, I'm not ready for that. You will be in 9 weeks. You will be ready in 9 weeks. You're going to have a conversation. You're going to discuss, comment, make comparisons, share thoughts on why school is important, and talk about what can be done locally or internationally. Wow. Remember, in an assessment, it's a snapshot. An assessment is not a test on every single thing I taught. That would take days. It's simply, this is where I step back the furthest with a proficiency lens and say, have you moved from that novice high closer into intermediate low? Are there more intermediate characteristics in your language than novice characteristics? Because that's what I'm working on in this class. That's what we're working on. So when I think about my daily planning, all of these checks for learning in any mode help me do better at a formative level in any mode and help prepare me for a summative task, again, in that interpersonal mode. And those same checks for learning, those same formative assessments also help prepare me for the presentational summative assessment. We're in on-demand writing, so it's not going to be perfect. You're not going to have time to corrected and get peer editing and all of that, but I want to know if there's more intermediate in the way that you can describe why school is important for all children. I'm giving you some coaching here to the kinds of things to help your thinking get a little more organized. Wow. So how do I make sure that I'm building towards those summative assessments in everything I do every day in my class? And here's where we're going to be thinking about how might I convert some of these into a virtual environment too, as well. So two of the key things you've noticed is growth towards higher levels of proficiency involves connecting my ideas, supporting my opinions. There are many others, but I've just pulled out two where I want to be intentional about building my skill. And this is a nod to a conversation that I have had often with Leslie Gran, who I know you're honoring later today. And Leslie has done wonderful work around intentional skill building. And it looks like this. There's my summative assessment, that conversation you saw before. So what are the key experiences or formative assessments that are going to lead to that at the beginning of my unit, at the middle, at the end, getting closer to being able to do that so that they move from just phrases to really putting some sentences and strings together. Write words and phrases associated with school. They could do that online. They could do that virtually, right? Describe what you like and don't like about school. I could have students, I could have you two people right now, I could assign partners, and you could, in the private chat right now, you could be communicating with one person to see have a conversation. Do you like this? Do you like this? Do you like this? Do you like this? We could use other tools, but even just using the simple chat feature, if you have that access in a Zoom, for example, I could do that practice. Create short descriptions of why all people can't go to school. I could, again, have a Google Doc, and I could have people just be putting in different descriptions. So you're saying, well, that's writing. Yes, but they are reading and reacting, which is just like what we do interpersonally with this device, right? When we're texting back and forth, we're negotiating meaning. So I could have my learners do that. It's a stepping away a little bit from the vocal spoken back and forth, but I could then have them share. Everyone could, again, maybe if you're able to put them in breakout rooms, just see what they could add to that list. Here's the list the whole class came up with. Now what might they add to it? Notice how along this continuum, we're increasing what they have to do, but it's building on. It's not doing it without preparation, not just, okay, today you're just going to compare one main difference. It's like, well, think about the words, think about the description, think about what you did last week. Now you're ready to do this. And finally, you're ready to comment on access to education from a personal point of view and share how one action you could take would improve access. You'll also notice that all of these various tasks that I put here, they could be done in the interpersonal mode. They could also be done in a presentational mode. It doesn't really matter how I'm developing the skills because they all develop and support the same growth and proficiency to help me be ready for an interpersonal assessment or the presentational assessment or the interpretive one as well. Here's one more example. Just let me move through supporting opinions. Here's that on-demand presentational task you saw before. How might I have built this one up? Well, let's look at a schedule. What do you like or not like? What are some comparisons based on school schedules? What's most important to you about your school day? Thinking about those schedules. So we looked at the schedule, we made comparisons. Now we're sort of analyzing and reflecting on it. We're giving our opinion, some reasons, 5 reasons why your school schedule should be changed. And again, it could be related to the virtual environment. And prepare notes for a debate advocating your school adopt characteristics of schools from around the world, something that you learned, getting you ready for that presentational task. All of these, as I think about them, are ways that we can bring together our thinking. So what I want to, as I have one more example I'd like to walk through, but I'm just going to take another pause here and just make us realize that the superpowers that we need are the same superpowers that we need to give our learners. Because to make these kinds of shifts, to really empower our learners, we have to make sure that we work together as these wonderful superheroes, right? The collaboration. The creativity, which is in that question. How do I take what I know works in a face-to-face classroom? How do I creatively make it happen in a virtual classroom? How do I make sure I tap my learners' creativity so it's not always so predictable of an answer and a response or one way? If I only ever expect perfection, I'm basically telling them, go use Google Translate, because that's my expectation. If they understand that perfect is not the goal, they don't have to go to Google Translate except to look up a word. That's how I use it. That's how most people use it. I'm looking for a word. What is that word? Oh, thank you. Now I'm going on and making my blog post, for example. The critical thinking and the communication skills. These 4 C's are so essential. They are your superpowers, and I want to make sure that you think about how can your department collaborate together, be creative, and make sure that that critical thinking and communication is happening among all of you, as well as empowering your learners. So we're going to pause in just a moment, but let me first of all, if you can go to menti.com. I know you've probably done this a lot in your class, right? We're just going to do a quick poll on, here are 5 things that I've been talking about. And I would like to know, this is really my action research, to help me know what are the ones that are most challenging, because those are the things that obviously ACTFL needs to work on to give you more support. We want to be part of that, that superpower team as well and join you and help you. So if you can go to menti.com and you enter that code, and I'm just double checking, yep, it's live, it's working. Mine has come up, and you can choose 2, and it's live and available, and I encourage you to do that. I'm going to leave this up here for a moment so you can see all the choices, and then you can start to make them, and I see people are already starting to enter. So I'm going to wait about 10 more seconds, and then I'll show you how the results are coming in. Again, which ones are the most challenging? Because these are the ones then that, hey, GWATFL, ACTFL, we all need to work on. This is where people are saying we would like some more support. Here we go. I'll just bring this over. Now you're seeing, you should be seeing, Karen, are we seeing the Mentimeter results now?
Yes, we are.
Okay, good, good, good. Excellent. So this is very helpful. Tasks with a real communicative purpose, that is very challenging. And this might be some place where you want to think about for your learners. What's important to them? That's the lens that we kept using in these examples that I was sharing with you. What would engage my learners? What do they really want to talk about? It's not low-level stuff. I keep, again, having taught middle school and high school students, I had to keep reminding myself, you know, their language was at their novice level, but not their thinking, not their thinking. Assessments and meaningful content, excellent. Well, then you'll see also there is another question there. So I'm gonna move on to the second one, and it is right here. Let's see, I just need to go here. I will prompt the next one. Okay, now it's the next question should have come up, should have come into your, this is the one that you're most excited to implement. And here we'll give you 1 vote. Which one are you saying, I can't wait to get back to my students, and this is what I'm really going to be working on? And again, this will be very, very helpful as all of us, both your departments, my work with ACTFL, GWATFL's work to support all of the teachers in your area. This will be extremely helpful. Let me just bring this in front for you also. What are you most excited to implement? Isn't that interesting? The ones that are the most challenged were also the most excited to implement. That is an amazing message. I applaud all of you. You are amazing educators. Even though it may be challenging, you're ready. You do have those superpowers, I can tell. Well, let me leave that open for a moment. I'm just going to continue on with one example, and then we'll have a couple of minutes at the end for some conversation. Again, as you said, how do we make sure that we can do this at a novice level and in a virtual environment? So here's an example that came from an actual work with a school. They had just gone virtual in the spring, elementary students, novice low, second graders that were meeting once a week. Oh my goodness. And for 5 weeks, they had 0 synchronous time with them. So we went back to their can-do statements and we said, what can we pull out of these? I can name people, places, and objects. I can express basic preferences. Okay, well, we want to start with that summative assessment. We always want to start with the end in mind. And the only thing they changed was the first bullet point. They said, okay, it's not going to be in class. It's going to be in a Zoom meeting in groups of 4. They're going to start with that first question, how are you feeling? But the other 2 are the same. Tell each other what you like to do in your neighborhood when you feel different emotions, and share as much as you can so that your friends can picture so much that they might even add a comment. Notice how they put in very nice little directions that just sound like, oh, of course I want to have this conversation. And yet I see can-do statement growth right there, trying to move from novice low, waiting for questions, to engaging a little bit, even at that lower novice level, these second graders. So then we had to dig down and say, well, what could naming people, places, and objects look like in this unit about my neighborhood, my community? Naming people, naming things I see. Well, how about in the expressing of preferences, likes and dislikes, and where I go when I'm feeling different ways? That's what we're going to work on. So here was one of the online tasks, simply given out.
Sorry to interrupt. We have about two more minutes.
2 more minutes. Perfect. Yep. Absolutely, Karen. Thank you. Yep. I'm watching that too. I appreciate that. So when they were given this, I can name things I see when I walk through my neighborhood. This is what they had the students do. What do you see? List the colors. List what you see. List the locations. List any nature. They just created their own vocabulary list. And then the assignment was use any of these words to describe your neighborhood. Instead of having to be given a word bank, they created their own. Now name different types of buildings, different shops, things to do. Okay, once I've done that, tell 3 things you do in my neighborhood, starting with this sentence stem. There's the coach giving me my start. In my neighborhood, I like to. Oh, I can finish several sentences like this, even at this novice level. Here's a little review. Just fill in these blanks. How are you feeling? And the last one, you fill in your own where you are. And let's review this piece. I go to school by, these were just some of the activities that they created and put online for their learners. They didn't even have a chance to talk to them about them. But finally, at the end, they said, let's make it a little more formative. Can they put things together? When I'm feeling, I like to go to by. Pretty controlled sentence, but that's where novice low, barely novice mid is. And yet they were putting their own sentences in here. And they kept asking themselves that question that you see at the bottom there. What comes next? Such a powerful question. And what came next after they had done this for about 6 weeks? These kids were ready for their summative assessment. They used Seesaw and they were successful, even in a virtual environment. And so as I conclude our time together, I just want to share with you that proficiency is a journey. It's a lifelong destination. It isn't about being perfect and then starting to take a step. It's taking the steps even when I'm not perfect. It's taking the steps towards something that I really passionately want to do and making sure that is what we are empowering our learners with every single day. So they are ready for their journey, for their destination. Thanks so much. And then Karen, if there are any one final question, perhaps we'd have time for that.
So certainly you have given us important information today. One of the biggest challenges for teachers throughout this experience is keeping our students motivated and feeling successful. You mentioned important keys such as being intentional with what we do, providing critical thinking, creativity, choices. One of the questions here is, students are using Google Translator. You mentioned this in your presentations, and I think you already give us an answer how we can avoid this. I don't know if you would like to expand a little more.
Sure. Well, I think again, like the example I just shared with you, it showed the students that they have a lot of language already in their head, and it's activating that and making sure that the task doesn't look beyond what they are confident they can do. You know, if what I find often is that, and I look back at my own teaching, when it didn't go well, I was moving too fast from here's the teacher controlling it to now do it all by yourself. And it's that middle ground in between that is so critical. And if I just make them go from here to do it by yourself and they're not ready because I haven't been doing some formative assessments to say, can you take these words and put them into a sentence? Can you do this? Can you ask questions? For example, in an online environment, how do I get my students to ask questions? Maybe I'm showing 2 images of 2 people with different backgrounds that I'm seeing different environments behind them. And I might just say, what questions do you think this person's going to ask? And what questions do you think this person's going to ask? That whole practice of just getting ready with a variety of questions would be getting them ready for something I could do online, where again, I'm having my students bring the questions they were thinking of. Now that's that middle ground of preparation before I went from, we practice the vocabulary, now have a conversation, right? So it's that middle ground that I think says, you don't have to go to Google Translate. Look at what I've helped you prepare. Now you are ready for this piece over here.
We have time for one last question.
Okay.
You build the vocabulary for them to describe the pictures and then ask them to do the sentences?
So obviously, you know, those ongoing checks for learning, it might be more vocabulary focused on a particular lesson. And so that's where we are building up vocabulary. And that's where, as a coach, you're sort of like isolating one skill. It'd be like saying today in swimming, we're just practicing your kick. Or today in swimming, it's just your breathing. Or, you know, it's an isolated skill. If that's all I know is how to kick, I'm a pretty bad swimmer. But if I combine that with my breathing, with a stroke, I've practiced all 3 of those in isolation, but they don't function in isolation. My formative assessment is, how do I put them all together, right? So how do I put that vocabulary that we practiced, some structures that we practiced, and at a novice level, they're more as automatic patterns. They're not in an abstract grammatical sense. You know, all of us start out, for example, with me gusta, me llamo. No one says, hey, these are pronouns. They're really weird. Look how they come in front. No one ever says that. It's simply, this is the way that you use language. And so it's taking what they know and then moving them into, in a guided way, right, towards what is a way that they could show that they can actually use those in a meaningful way.
Well, thank you so much, Paul, for your excellent contributions to World Language Professional Development and to our GWATFL mission.